Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Q&A video here on the Aviation Pro channel. Question number 6 today in this series where we gain some aviation knowledge one question at a time. Today, coming to you from my home base, probably going to be quite a bit of a long video, big topic to discuss today. So without further ado, let's introduce the question. And today's question comes from Lorenz. Thank you, Lorenz, for your question, and special wing wave to you. And Lorenz's question is, did you have to do some tests before getting into flight school? And if so, how did you prepare for the tests? Very good question. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to an anonymous submission who asked about the compass test for flight training selection. Big question, big topic. I'm just going to use this opportunity to kind of turn this into a bit of a guide on how I actually prepared for my flight training, and maybe it can be some use to you. I should say the flight training selection procedure. The selection procedure is, of course, a very big thing. It's a very quite a tough period to go through. A lot of things happen at once, and you have to prepare well. At least you want to prepare well. Now, the compass test that was asked in the other question, I did not specifically do, but I will just give you a general idea of the test that I did. It will probably be relatively similar, and it will be relatively similar at different flight schools, okay? So I'll just treat it step by step, kind of go through all the phases of a typical flight training selection that you might encounter. And the first tip that I already want to give is make sure you treat it step by step as well. I mean, it makes no sense to prepare for the last step of the flight training selection while you still have to do the first step, okay? So make sure you treat it step by step, prepare for each phase as you go through the selection process as well as possible. And, I always give the advice, like, you want to have the feeling that you're sitting there, that I did everything I could to prepare. If I feel now, then it's okay, then this is not for me. But then at least I know I did everything to prepare, okay? So just some general tip before we start off with the first phase. So what could a first phase look like? Usually it is some sort of, test where you have to do a typical aptitude test. Or I think the compass test is quite similar as well. An aptitude test in the form of, little IQ tests where you have to solve puzzles in a short amount of time, or, rows of figures, and then you have to decide what is the last figure, or what should the last figure be, or words, or maybe you have to do some mental calculations, things like that. And the big thing here, since it's specifically for flight training for pilots, is that you have to do that under pressure, okay? So these tests, maybe you have some sort of mathematical equation or question, and you only get 15 seconds to answer that questions, and you have an A, B, C, D, or even an E option, or maybe even more, all right? So there's not a lot of time. You really have to quickly calculate things or quickly figure out what is the next figure in the row of figures. So the way to prepare for this, at least how I did it, is to simply get a subscription at a website where you can practice these kind of things. Some people might say, yeah, you cannot really practice this. It's something that it just tests a baseline. But again, like I said in the beginning, you want to sit there, having the comfort of the feeling that you did everything you could have done to prepare for these tests, all right? And it just allows you to get used to the speed of those tests and performing under pressure. Now, you can probably find some sort of training website for this. A lot of businesses and companies use this also for aptitude tests in general. Maybe you can find some flight training specific websites where you can practice this. So I took like a 1-month subscription before this phase would start, and I just practiced every day. And then I increased the difficulty more and more, increased or decreased the amount of time available per question. What I also did specifically for maths, because I was at university for a while, and my maths had kind of sink down my skills in that. After high school, we were probably a bit more skilled, so I had to kind of get back into maths and get my brain active, doing mathematical calculations again by head. So I basically wrote down equations, starting from very simple equations to more complex equations on a sheet of paper, And then, I know, for 10 questions, I would give myself, I don't know, 1 minute, 1.5 minutes to solve all the questions to the best of my ability. And then I decrease the time as I moved on. So in this way, I just really prepared myself, prepared my brain to get active, to prepare for the stress of such tests. All right. So that's how I did it. I would definitely recommend you to do that as well. Just give it your best and just get a little subscription at some sort of website so you can practice that. Then another phase that you might get is more a psychological test. And for me, I found that one probably the most difficult to prepare, the most difficult to kind of grasp, because it's very hard to grasp what they really want to test. The advice that I can give you for such phase would be to just, be yourself. It's very cliche, but it's very important in this phase. The things that you might encounter is you might get a huge questionnaire with all kinds of statements about your personality. You just have to fill that in. You don't have to pretend to be anyone. Just fill in the questions honestly, and it should be okay. But you might also get like a interview. You might get a little role play acting where you have to act as a captain. You might get a group assignment where within a short amount of time you have to solve something or make something, some sort of presentation, for example, with your group. And while you're being observed by the psychologist, of course. And again, like a personal interview, maybe some other assignment where they observe you during that assignment. Again, how to prepare for this? I just try to be as calm as possible. In general, you can prepare for this by kind of, determining what is the personality or the competencies of a pilot, right? Maybe you can find some of the competencies for your airline that you want to apply for. Kind of get an idea of what are the behaviors they want to see in you as a future captain, because you're going to be trained and selected to become a future captain. That's, of course, what the airline wants you for. So if you can get a bit of an idea of all the personality characteristics that an ideal pilot should have, and some of the competencies that they will be testing throughout your career, then you can build a bit of a mental picture of what they are looking for. Also, look at cockpit videos. Look at a lot of the cockpit videos on YouTube to determine what the role of a pilot is and what are the different factors. In a role play, you might they might ask you to tell a cabin crew member to stop looking on their phone, for example. These are the kind of scenarios that you would also encounter in real life. And by just getting a bit of an idea of how the whole operation of an aircraft works, you kind of have an idea what job you're being selected for. It's not just flying a plane. It's a much wider thing, and that's exactly what they're also testing in this phase. So by building that picture, by building that scheme in your head about your future job, you can prepare well for this phase. Another thing, of course, is you might have to write some sort of description of your life. Make sure you do, just write a nice description of yourself. Make a list also of your strong points, but definitely also your weak points. Everyone has weak points. Don't worry about that. Also, pilots have a lot of weak points. And definitely mention them, and also think about how you would tackle them as you progress during flight training or during career, right? That's very important. So you just have to give a very honest picture of yourself. It doesn't make sense to hold up some fake picture of yourself, because in the long run, as you get through flight training, you're just going to hit a wall at some point, because if you're not being honest during any of these phases, then it's only going to get more difficult for yourself, okay? But like I said, just prepare for this phase honestly, knowing that you prepared to the best of your ability. And then if you get through to the next phase, then it's perfect. If you do not get through the next phase, well, at least you did everything you could, and maybe you can try some other flight school, okay? So that's kind of the psychological phase. Again, quite difficult to determine and to grasp the feeling of such day, because you're going to be observed by people. They're going to be looking at you. They're going to, not give a lot of feedback until the final result. So, it's something you have to live through. Okay. Then next, you might get some sort of hand-foot-eye coordination test in the form of some sort of video game-like exercise. It really depends on the flight school again. I think the compass test also involves something like that. Or a flight school might actually put you in a little simulator to do some flying patterns. That was the personal case for me. How to prepare for such phase? Well, honestly, flight simming, it really, really helps, especially if you're being put in a simulator, like you're going to be flying some patterns. But of course, you're going to be quite stressed in such situation because it's a selection phase. You want to go through to the next phase. And by practicing a flight sim and just getting that stick and rudder feeling like you would also need in real life, you can really quite well get a feeling of the hand-foot-eye coordination that you're later going to use in real life, but that you're also going to need during this selection phase, all right? So practice with that. Fire up flight sim, go practice some basic maneuvers. Maybe you can find some programs where maybe with a joystick you can also do some other hand-foot-eye coordination tests. But yeah, make sure you practice that. Make sure you get a feeling of what it's like to steer an airplane, and then such phase should be quite doable, okay? So those are kind of the basic tests, in the first few phases of a flight training selection. The psychological tests, the IQ tests, aptitude tests, and the hand-foot-eye coordination. Quite exciting. There might be quite a bit of time between different phases of the flight training selection, so you have time to prepare for each phase. But again, this depends a little bit on the flight school. So another phase that you might get, especially if you're going to a flight school which is specifically hiring for a particular airline through, for example, a cadet program, they might already have a phase where you kind of have your job interview already beforehand, all right? So before you actually join the airline, part of the selection process might already be the job interview. So are you already in the airline with one foot, so to speak, okay? And this is, of course, a very exciting part. You have passed all the IQ tests. Your basic competencies are all right to become a pilot. But now you have to prove that you want to join the airline you want to work for, want to go through the flight training with that airline. And, of course, they want to see what you are like as a future captain. And the way I prepared for this phase is kind of similar to the second phase I mentioned. Get a good idea of the role of your job, which is more than just flying. Watch the videos, talk to people, go to maybe some open day where you can talk to pilots. Maybe you can have a family member or a friend who is a pilot, so you can get a bit of an idea of the job. It's very important to build that picture of the job and your future duties as a captain in your head, okay? Maybe you can find some books. There are quite a lot of good books available as well from pilots to pilots, advising them about selection procedures or about your future job and what are the things you have to look for, some of the scenarios you have to go through. And by having that picture in your mind, you do not only have a future picture of yourself that you want to portray to the people that are going to do your job interview, but you can also relate that whole picture of a pilot to your past life. Maybe in school you've encountered some situations, or maybe you did some voluntary work or some other job where you encountered situations, and maybe you handled that situation using competencies as a pilot. Maybe you can give a description of how you handled a situation based on those competencies, and then if you can kind of make that link between that situation and a future situation that you might encounter as a pilot, you kind of give them the idea, of course, that you are able to deal with such situations using your knowledge and skills at those moments. All right, so that's a very nice way of not only preparing for the future, but also kind of building the picture of the past and showing the picture of the past to the people who are doing the job interview, okay? So that would be a good preparation. Again, make sure you make the list of strong points and why they make you strong, your weak points and why they make you weak, and how you want to tackle them during the flight training and later in life. It's very important to do that. Also, of course, especially if you're going to apply for a specific airline, make sure you actually read up on information about the airline. Get an idea of the fleet size, get an idea of the aircraft type you might be flying in the future, get an idea of the people involved, who's the CEO, who's the, kind of in the management functions, what's the approximate size of the amount of pilots and the amount of cabin crew, what kind of ground crew is there, do you have an engineering and maintenance department maybe, it's very important, because it's a job interview technically, to of course get a very good picture of the airline itself. Okay, you're gonna score points with that. If you do not know some information there, or if you are missing out on some information, that's of course a bad thing. Another thing I want to say for this phase, before we go to the next one, is make sure you visit an open day of your flight school. If you come there and they kind of sense that you have not visited an open day, or they might straight up ask you that question and you have to answer no to that question, that's not a good impression, right? So make sure you go out there, go to the flight school. Every flight school will have some sort of open days, or they might visit schools in your country for promotion, so you can say, okay, this flight school actually visited my school, I went there, and then 1 year later I actually went to the open day. I gained a lot of experience, it really got me excited, and so you kind of have a good picture of the flight training itself as well. So it's really important that you get to that, all right? And lastly, well, kind of tying in with it all, you're not becoming just a pilot just because it's fun. You really have to go through why you want to become a pilot. So why do we want to become a pilot for this airline, but why in general as well? I mean, they're going to ask you, are you looking forward to just sitting in the cockpit for 10 hours, during crossing time zones during the night? It's going to be quite hard, right? They might, give you such statements or such questions. So you really need to prepare well, determining, again, using the competencies and using your knowledge from videos and books about the job of a pilot, what makes it so exciting for you, all right? And for me, I kind of answer such questions like, I like the dynamic nature of becoming a pilot, or being a pilot, handling each flight as a little project, getting it from A to B, dealing with the different parties involved, etc., etc. You can create a very nice picture of your job as a pilot. So it's really important to focus on that. It's not just flying. Yes, the flying is great. It's amazing. You get to see destinations. Yes. But there's a lot more involved. Okay, so make sure you really prepare that well, and then you should have quite a good chance at the job interview phase. So that's kind of the major phases. A last phase that you might encounter is, of course, the medical test. Actually, a lot of flight schools do that at the end of the flight training selection. And that's because, I think statistically the least people drop out here. But of course, before you join the flight training, you have to make sure that you actually are able to meet the medical requirements, which the eyesight and the length of your body, color blindness, things like that. Of course, you can find such information on the websites of your flight school. And if you have any questions, make sure you actually, or doubts, make sure you can actually ask the flight school information about that. And they might actually, if there really are doubts, put the medical examination beforehand, okay? Now, the medical examination, if everything is in general all right, is not a big deal, except for alcohol and drugs. Alcohol and drugs are just a no-go in flying, right? So especially drugs are some things that are very, very traceable, and they're going to test for that through blood tests, urine tests. So you just don't want to do that. Alcohol, well, of course we all like a drink. Also pilots like a drink after the flight. But just limit that. Try to limit that, during your selection process, and especially in the weeks leading up to your medical tests. Then it should be fine. Okay, but don't take any risks there. You don't want to mess up in this part, all right? Because it's not going to make a good impression. You're probably going to be thrown out of the flight training selection, and that would be a huge pity. So make sure you just stay clean with everything, and then if you're medically all right, it should be fine. But with that, I have to say, of course, make sure you get a bit of a physical shape, a mental shape. This whole selection process, for me, it took about a year. Again, it really depends on the flight school and how busy it is. It might take a little bit shorter right now, but there was a lot of time between the different phases. But you can use that time to, get physically fit, mentally fit, and which also helps with the selection process itself, of course. But, it just gives you a better feeling also as you hopefully start flight training later on. So give that some consideration. Otherwise the medical test should be quite easily passable if all the eyesight and hearing stuff is just okay. But you just want to be physically fit. It really helps you to get through flight training later on, okay? So those are kind of the phases that I want to talk about of the selection process. Quite a long video, I know, but I hope this gives you a bit of an insight and some tips. As you can see, coming back to your question, Lorenz, there are indeed quite a few tests that you have to do, and it's not easy, but very much worth it. And I just want to finish off with some general tips for flight training selection. I already gave the tip of preparing. Preparing is already half of the work. You want to sit there with the feeling that you did everything you can, and if you feel, at least that you did the best of your ability, then this is not for you. But by preparing, yes, you might not specifically pass a test just because you prepared well, but at least you're sitting there much more comfortably, not stressing out with the idea of, have I actually done enough for this selection? Have I done enough for this particular phase? You want to sit there with that comfort feeling. I did everything I could. Let's go for it and do the best we can. Okay, so that's first of all. Dress to impress. Very important. I mean, you're going to be walking around later on as a pilot in uniform all the time. So you don't want to come there in a very sluggish type of clothing. Just get suited up, I would say. Get a nice suit for your flight training selection process, and then go through all phases in that, except for the medical phase. Probably don't really need that to wear the whole suit there. But that's very important. It's going to be your job later on. It's going to be where you'll be working in later on, and it gives just gives the impression that you care about this, that you really are going for this, and that you want this job in the future. Get a watch. A watch is very important to keep time. I think at least some sort of watch, especially, for example, during the second phase where you might have a group assignment where you have to solve something together within a 10 or 15 minutes. It's nice if you are the one with a watch that can keep the time, right? That can keep track of the time and that can manage the situation based on the time, right? And of course, you don't want to be looking at your phone. Probably your phone is stowed away in the first place anyway. So that is important. Physical fitness, mental fitness, make sure that it's that you work on that also before the selection. And lastly, I would say try to enjoy it a little bit as well. If this option fails at this flight school, there might be other flight schools which you can try. And relating back to the first tip of preparing well and having that comfortable feeling, if you have that, if you do not have to stress too much, you can also start to enjoying it a little bit. Also with the other people that you encounter. Some people you will see back. Some people will end up with you in the same class as you at flight training. Some people will drop out, unfortunately. But try to enjoy it a little bit. It's a very special process. It's a great if you do not get through, at least it's a great experience. You learn a lot in a short amount of time, and which is also helpful for other jobs potentially. All right, so. But, things like a phase where you have to do the hand-foot-eye coordination, maybe in a simulator even, of course, that's very cool. So try to enjoy it a little bit as well. That makes it a bit easier, okay? So these are my general tips for flight training selection. I hope that gives you a bit of an insight. If you have any tips or questions, make sure you leave them below about flight training selection. Maybe you can help some others with that as well. This is just my view. It might be different for you. But yeah, I hope this gives you just a general feeling of being prepared a little bit extra by watching this video, okay? That's it for now for this Q&A video, a long one. We will be back soon, hopefully, with another Q&A video. If you have any questions you want to post in the question box, make sure you follow the link in the description. There's a little link to a Google form where you can post questions for this Q&A series, and who knows, your question might be featured in the next video for a nice answer. All right, for now, I will say cheers here from my home base, and I will see you on the next one. And good luck with your flight training selection.